The night on New Meridian was quiet, and the twin moons hung low over the small human colony like watchful eyes in the dark sky above Marcus. Chum sat on his porch and listened to the sounds of the frontier world settling into sleep. And somewhere inside his modest home, his 8-year-old daughter Lily was dreaming of adventures among the stars. He had no idea that adventure was about to find them in the worst possible way. The Verax came without warning, and their ships dropped through the atmosphere like falling knives cutting through silk. And before the colony's basic defense grid could even register the threat, the reptilian raiders had already touched down on the outskirts of the settlement. Captain Skethrel of the slave ship Crushing Talon surveyed the human colony through his targeting scope and felt nothing but contempt for these soft creatures who had only recently crawled out of their home system. The Verax had been taking slaves from weaker species for thousands of years, and these humans were just the latest addition to their catalog of prey. Spread out and collect the merchandise, Skethrel hissed to his crew through the communication link. These creatures have no claws and no armor and no venom. They will offer no resistance worth mentioning. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Crickstill, nodded and led the raiding party into the sleeping streets. Marcus heard the first scream and was on his feet before the sound had finished echoing through the night. 8 years of combat training kicked in without conscious thought, and his hand found the pulse pistol he kept hidden beneath the porch boards. But the Verax were fast and experienced and cruel, and they knew exactly how to execute a raid on an unprepared settlement. 2 of them crashed through his back door while he was still moving toward the front, and Marcus spun to face them with his weapon raised. The first Verax took a pulse round directly to his chest and went down hard. But the second one was already past Marcus and heading for the stairs, heading for Lily's room. Marcus roared and gave chase, but a third Verax came through the window and tackled him from behind, and the 2 of them crashed through a table and onto the floor. He fought like a man possessed, driving his elbow into the alien's throat and feeling scales crack beneath the blow. But by the time he had thrown off his attacker, he could hear his daughter screaming from upstairs, "Daddy!" That single word cut through Marcus like a blade made of ice and fire, and he took the stairs 3 at a time with blood running from a cut on his forehead. But Lily's room was empty, and the window was shattered, and in the distance he could see the Verax shuttles already lifting off into the night sky. Stood there for a moment that felt like 1,000 years, and his hand shook as he picked up the stuffed rabbit that lay abandoned on Lily's bed. Same rabbit she had slept with every night since she was 3 years old. Something changed in Marcus Chun in that moment, and if any of the Verax had been there to witness it, they might have understood the terrible mistake they had just made. But they were already gone, already celebrating their successful raid and counting their new merchandise like the ignorant predators they were. Marcus pulled out his communicator and made a fade single call to a frequency he had hoped never to use again. "This is Sergeant Major Chun calling. Any active members of the Crimson Wolves? I need immediate assistance. Priority Alpha." The response came back within seconds, and the voice on the other end belonged to a woman Marcus had served with through 3 separate wars. "Marcus, this is Captain Rodriguez. What is your situation?" "They took Lily," Marcus said, and his voice was steady even though his heart was shattering into 1,000,000 pieces. "Verax slavers hit New Meridian about 5 minutes ago, and they took my daughter along with 6 other colonists." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Rodriguez spoke again, her voice had gone cold and hard as the steel they had both been forged from were already moving across the colony. Other families were discovering their own losses, and the wailing of parents and children and siblings filled the night air like a chorus of broken hearts. But Marcus did not wail, and he did not cry, and he did not fall to his knees and beg the universe for mercy. He had been a Marine for 20 years before retiring to raise his daughter after his wife passed away. And he knew that tears would not bring Lily back, only action would do that. And action was something Marcus Chun understood very well. He walked to his storage shed and opened the locked container he had sworn never to touch again. And inside was the combat armor he had worn through battles that would have driven lesser men insane. The armor still fit perfectly. And Marcus took that as a sign from whatever powers watched over soldiers and their children within 2 hours. 12 veterans had gathered at his home, and each of them wore the same expression of cold determination. Rodriguez was there, along with Sergeant Kowalski and Corporal Tanaka, and 9 others who had answered the call without hesitation. "The Verax think they got away clean," Rodriguez said as they gathered around a tactical display. "They have no idea what they just woke up." Marcus looked at his old friends and comrades, and for the first time since the nightmare began, he felt something other than despair. He felt the beginning of something the Verax had never encountered. Before, he felt the patience of a predator who knew exactly how to track his prey across any distance and through any obstacle. "We need a ship," Marcus said. "Something fast enough to catch them and tough enough to survive what comes next." Kowalski grinned, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Already handled. My cousin runs a salvage yard 3 systems over, and he has a decommissioned frigate that just needs a little love and attention." Tanaka pulled up a star chart and began plotting possible routes the Verax might have taken. "Slavers like this usually head for the outer rim markets," she said. "We can calculate their most likely trajectory and get ahead of them if we push hard enough." Rodriguez nodded and turned to address the group. "Listen up. Wolves, what we are about to do is not sanctioned by Terran command, and there will be no backup and no official support. And every single one of us might die out there in the black." Nobody moved, and nobody spoke, and nobody even blinked. "That little girl in there needs us," Rodriguez continued. "And I do not know about the rest of you, but I did not survive 4 wars just to let some scaled-up lizards steal human children from their beds." Marcus looked at the faces of his friends, and he saw the same fire burning in all of them. The Verax had taken his daughter, and they thought they had gotten away with it. They had no idea that 12 of the most dangerous humans ever trained were about to come hunting for them, and humans, unlike any other species in the known galaxy, never stopped hunting once they had a reason to run. Never. The holding cells aboard the crushing talons smelled like fear and rust and something else that Lily Chun could not identify but knew she did not like. She sat in the corner of the cell with her knees pulled up to her chest and watched the other captives with eyes that were far too calm for a child in her situation. There were 6 adults with her, and all of them were colonists from New Meridian who had been snatched from their beds, just like she had been a woman named Sarah was crying softly in the opposite corner, and a man named David was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. But Lily was not crying, and she was not pacing. She was watching the guards every 4 minutes. A Verax soldier would walk past their cell and glance inside before continuing on his patrol route. And Lily had been counting the intervals since they first threw her in here. Her daddy had taught her many things over the years, and one of those things was that information was the most powerful weapon in any fight. You need to understand your enemy. He had told her once when they were camping under the stars of New Meridian. Watch them and learn their patterns and find their weaknesses, and then use all of that against them when the time is right. Lily did not know when the time would be right, but she knew it would come eventually because her daddy was out there somewhere and he would never stop looking for her. She believed this with every fiber of her being, and that belief was what kept her calm while the adults around her fell apart. Captain Skethrel reviewed the inventory of their new acquisitions from the comfort of his command chair and felt quite pleased with himself. 7 humans in total. including one juvenile female who would fetch a premium price from certain buyers on the Outer Rim who preferred their servants young and trainable. He pulled up the Galactic Species database on his console and scrolled to the entry for humans. And what he read there confirmed everything he already believed about these pathetic creatures category. Persistence predator, danger rating, low notes. Primarily scavengers, avoid only if outnumbered. Skell hissed a laugh and closed the file. The Felani who had written that entry were known for their careful research. And if they said humans were harmless, then humans were harmless. What the captain did not know was that the Felani had only ever encountered human diplomats. And diplomats were specifically chosen for their calm demeanors and non-threatening appearances. Nobody had ever bothered to catalog what happened when you pushed a human too far. Nobody had documented what ordinary humans became when you threatened their families and their homes and their children. That information simply did not exist in any database the Verax had access to down in the holding cells. A young guard named Rextol decided to have some fun with the prisoners. He was barely an adult by Verax standards, and this was his first raiding mission. And he wanted to prove himself to the older warriors who had laughed at his inexperience. Look at these soft creatures, he hissed as he approached the cell bars. No scales and no claws and no teeth worth mentioning. How did your species even survive long enough to reach the stars? The adult humans shrank back from his approach, and Vrextal felt a surge of satisfaction at their fear, but the little one did not move. She just sat there in a corner and watched him with those strange round eyes that held no terror at. Alvrextal found this annoying, and he reached through the bars to grab at her just to see her flinch. What happened next would become a story told in whispers throughout the Verax fleet for years to come. Lily moved faster than any child should have been able to move, and her small teeth closed around two of Vrextal's fingers with crushing force. The young guard screamed as she bit clean through the digits, and then spat them back at him. Through the bars, green blood sprayed across the cell floor, and Vrextal stumbled backward, clutching his maimed hand and shrieking in pain and disbelief. The other guards came running, and when they saw what had happened, they actually laughed at their young comrade, defeated by a human child. One of them mocked. Perhaps you should request a transfer to kitchen duty where the vegetables cannot fight back. Rextal was dragged away to the medical bay, and nobody thought to punish Lily for what she had done. After all, she was just a child throwing a tantrum, and children were not dangerous no matter what species they belonged to. But the adult humans in that cell had seen something that the Verax guards had missed entirely. They had seen the way Lily calculated her strike, and the way she aimed for maximum damage, and the way she showed no hesitation or regret afterward. They had seen a predator in training, and it reminded them of what they themselves were capable of when pushed to the edge. Sarah stopped crying and moved closer to David, and they exchanged a look that needed no words to communicate its meaning. If an 8-year-old girl could fight back then, so could they. Over the next several days, the human captives began to work together in ways that Verax never noticed. They communicated through hand signals that humanity had developed over thousands of years of warfare, and they passed information through seemingly innocent conversations that the guards could not decode. David worked as an engineer back on New Meridian, and he started asking questions about the ship that seemed like simple curiosity, but were actually reconnaissance. Sarah had been a nurse, and she memorized the patrol schedules and shift changes by pretending to be too afraid to sleep. And Lily continued to watch and count and remember everything she saw. They stole utensils from their food trays and hid them in places the guards never thought to check. They loosened bolts in their cell whenever they had a moment of privacy. They mapped the entire ship through careful observation, and shared everything they learned through their silent communication. Network none of them knew if rescue was coming, but all of them knew that they had to be ready when the opportunity arrived. Captain Skethrall noticed that his prisoners had grown quieter over the past few days, and he assumed this meant they had finally accepted their fate. The spirit breaks quickly in these soft ones, he commented to his second-in-command. They will make excellent slaves once we reach the markets. Crystal nodded in agreement, but something in the back of his mind felt uneasy about the way the humans had changed. They were too calm now, and their eyes had taken on a quality he could not quite identify. It reminded him of the way prey animals sometimes went still right before they transformed into something else entirely, but that was ridiculous because humans were not dangerous and the database said so, and databases did not lie. The crushing talon continued on its course toward the outer rim, and every hour brought them closer to the slave markets where their cargo would be sold to the highest bidders. And every hour, the humans grew more prepared and more coordinated and more ready for whatever came next, because somewhere out there in the black void between stars, 12 veterans were coming for them. And when humans came for their own, they brought something with them that no other species in the galaxy truly understood. They brought the patient fury of a predator that had learned to hunt across entire continents and wait for days and weeks and months for the perfect moment to strike. They brought the terrible determination of a species that had conquered its own world not through strength or speed, but through sheer, stubborn refusal to ever give up. They brought the wrath of parents and friends and comrades who would burn the entire galaxy to ashes if that was what it took to bring their people home. The Verax had no idea what was coming for them, but they were about to learn. The frigate had seen better days, but she was fast and she was tough, and she would carry them to the ends of the galaxy if that was what the mission required. Marcus stood at the helm and stared out at the endless stars while his team worked around him to keep the old ship running at maximum efficiency. They had been chasing the crushing talon for 9 days now, and in that time, none of them had slept more than a few hours at a stretch. Humans were not the fastest species in the galaxy, and they were not the strongest, and they certainly were not the most technologically advanced, but they had one advantage that no other species had ever developed to the same degree. They simply did not stop. Captain Rodriguez approached Marcus with a datapad showing their current trajectory calculations. We are gaining on them, she reported. The Verax stopped at a trading station about 18 hours ago to refuel and offload some cargo, and that gave us the time we needed to close the gap. Marcus nodded without taking his eyes off the stars. How long until we catch them? At our current speed, and assuming they maintain their course, we should intercept them in approximately 3 days. 3 more days, Marcus thought, and his hands tightened on the console until his knuckles turned white. 3 more days that Lily would spend in the hands of those monsters. Push the engines harder, he said quietly. Rodriguez frowned. Marcus, we are already running 20% above the recommended maximum. If we push any harder, we risk burning out the entire drive system. Then we burn it out, Marcus replied. We can worry about getting home after we have my daughter back. Rodriguez studied her old friend's face for a long moment, before nodding slowly. Understood, Sergeant Major. She turned to relay the order, and soon the old frigate was screaming through space at speeds that would have made her original designers faint with horror. The Verax began to notice something strange at every station they stopped at along their route to the outer rim. There were questions being asked about their ship, and someone had placed a bounty on information regarding their trajectory at first. Skethrall dismissed it as coincidence or perhaps competition from rival slaving operations, but the reports kept coming, and each one was more disturbing than the last. A human ship was spotted at the Keelix Station trading post 2 days behind us. Crixtel reported with visible concern in his voice. The station master says they were asking about us specifically. Skethril waved a clawed hand dismissively. Let them ask. They are 2 days behind us, and we will be at the markets long before they can catch up. Captain, there is more, Crixtel continued. I have been receiving communications from other ships in our fleet, and several of them have reported similar situations. What do you mean? Ships that took human captives from various colonies over the past month have been going dark. One by one, Skethril felt something cold slither down his spine, but he refused to show weakness in front of his crew. Going dark could mean many things. Perhaps they encountered technical difficulties or were attacked by pirates. The escape pods tell a different story. Captain, Crixtel pulled up a series of reports on the main display, and what Skethril read there made his scales prickle with sudden unease. 3 Verax ships had been found drifting in space over the past 2 weeks, and all of them had been completely emptied of crew. The Verax warriors had not been killed, but rather had been found floating in escape pods, and every single one of them was in a state of absolute psychological collapse when questioned by rescue teams. They could only repeat the same phrases over and over again. They do not stop. They came through the walls. They never stop coming. The humans do not die like they are supposed to. Skethril stared at the reports for a long moment before closing the display with a sharp gesture. Superstitious nonsense, he declared, loudly enough for the bridge crew to hear. Humans are a weak species with no natural weapons and no combat capabilities worth mentioning. I will not have my crew frightened by the ravings of cowards who lost their ships to who knows what. But when he returned to his private quarters that night, Skethril found himself unable to sleep, pulled up the communication logs, and found a message waiting for him from Elder Verax, one of the oldest and most respected members of his species. The message contained a single file attachment and a brief note. You have made a terrible mistake. Young Captain, read the attached document and pray that you can still escape what is coming for you. Skethril opened the attachment and found himself reading a report from a species that had encountered Earth almost 200 years ago during humanity's first tentative steps into the wider galaxy. The report was written in a tone of barely contained terror, and it described humans in terms that made Skethril want to laugh out loud at its obvious exaggeration until he kept reading. The humans appear harmless at first. Observation: they have no claws and no fangs, and no armor and no venom, and they seem content to negotiate and trade peacefully with all species they encounter. However, our researchers have discovered something deeply disturbing about this species that does not appear in any standard database. When provoked, when threatened, when their families or communities are endangered, humans transform into something else entirely. They become what they call honey badgers, a reference to a small creature from their homeworld that was known for attacking predators hundreds of times. Its size without any regard for its own safety. Do not take their young. Do not wound them and let them live. Do not give them a reason to hunt you, because humans do not hunt like other predators. They do not strike quickly and retreat if they fail. They follow, they track, they pursue. They will chase you across star systems and through nebulae and into the heart of a black hole if that is what it takes to reach you. And when they finally catch you, and they will catch you, they will make you understand exactly why their home world has no other apex predators left. We recommend avoiding all contact with humanity, and especially avoiding any action that could be construed as hostile toward their offspring. This is not a species to be hunted. This is a species to be feared. Skethril finished reading, and sat in silence for a long time. Then he deleted the file and told himself it was nothing but propaganda designed to scare young captains away from a profitable market. The humans following him were probably just a rescue party sent by some colonial government, and they would give up soon enough when they realized how far behind they were. He was still telling himself this when his ship dropped out of hyperspace 3 days later and found a human frigate waiting for them at the edge of the system. Impossible. Crickstal breathed as the sensors confirmed what they were seeing. They should be at least 20 hours behind us. How did they get ahead? Scathro stared at the human ship on his display and felt his confidence crumble like sand in a storm. They must have taken the shortcut through the Verax Nebula, one of his officers said quietly. But that route is suicide. The radiation alone would kill any crew in a matter of hours. Unless the crew was willing to die to reach us, Crickstal replied. And his voice carried a new note of fear that spread quickly through the bridge. The human frigate sat motionless in space. And for a long moment, nothing happened. Then Marcus Chun's face appeared on the main communication display. And every Verax on the bridge felt their blood run cold at what they saw in his eyes. "I am only going to say this once," Marcus said, and his voice was calm and steady and absolutely terrifying. "You have something that belongs to me, and you are going to give her back. We have laws against human interference in Verax affairs." Scathral managed to reply, though his voice cracked slightly. "Turn back now or face the consequences." Marcus smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey after a very long hunt. "You took my daughter," he said simply. "There are no consequences in this galaxy that will stop me from getting her back." The communication cut off, and the human ship began to move toward them. Scathral finally understood the ancient report he had deleted. Humans were not a soft species at all. They were honey badgers, and they had found their target, and nothing in the universe was going to save the Verax from what came next. The crushing talon opened fire first because Scathral still believed that superior firepower could solve any problem. His ship was 3 times the size of the human frigate and carried weapons designed to crack open armored transports like eggs. The first volley should have reduced the humans to floating debris and ended this ridiculous chase once and for all, but the human pilot was good. Impossibly good, and the frigate danced through the barrage like a leaf in a hurricane, always moving and never staying in one place long enough to be hit. "They are heading directly for us," Crickstal shouted over the roar of the crushing talon's weapons. "They intend to board." "Then let them," Scathral snarled. "We outnumber them 3 to 1. And every warrior aboard this ship has been trained for close combat since they hatched. The humans will die the moment they set foot on our decks." He was so very wrong. The human frigate slammed into the side of the crushing talon with a grinding shriek of tortured metal, and before the Verax could react, a breaching charge blew a hole through the outer hull. 12 humans poured through the breach like water through a broken dam, and what followed would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. Marcus Chun was first through the hole, and his pulse rifle was already firing before his boots touched the deck. The first 2 Verax guards went down without ever seeing what hit them, and Marcus was already moving toward the next target before their bodies had finished. Falling behind him came Rodriguez and Kowalski and Tanaka and the rest of the wolves, and together they moved through the corridors with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They did not fight like individuals, but rather like a single organism with 12 bodies, each one covering the others and moving in perfect synchronization. A squad of Verax warriors rushed to meet them in the main corridor, and what followed was not a battle but a slaughter. The aliens were bigger and stronger and had natural weapons built into their bodies, but the humans had something the Verax had never. Encountered before, they had 10,000 years of warfare, bred into their genes, and a desperate fury that turned every single one of them into an unstoppable force. Kowalski took a blade through his shoulder and did not even slow down, using his wounded arm to grab the Verax who had stabbed him and hold the alien in place, while he put 3 rounds through its skull with his other hand. Tanaka moved through the enemy like a dancer, her combat knife flickering in and out of Verax's throats so fast that the aliens barely had time to realize they were dying before they hit the floor. Rodriguez stood back to back with a Marine named Jackson, and together they held a choke point against a dozen attackers while the rest of the team pushed forward. And Marcus was something else entirely. He moved through the Verax ship like a ghost made of rage and violence, and nothing that stood in his way survived the encounter. When his rifle ran dry, he used his pistol. When his pistol ran dry, he used his knife. When his knife broke off in a Verax warrior's chest, he used his bare hands and his teeth and anything else he could find. A young Verax soldier managed to slash him across the ribs with razor-sharp claws, and Marcus responded by grabbing the alien's arm and breaking it in 3 places before throwing him into 2 of his comrades. "Which way to the holding cells?" Marcus shouted as he crushed another alien's throat beneath his boot. Rodriguez checked her tactical display while putting a round through an approaching enemy, 2 decks down and 3 quarters starboard. "I am reading multiple life signs that match human biological signatures." "Then that is where we go." The wolves cut a path through the ship like a hot knife through flesh, and every Verax who stood against them learned the same terrible lesson. Humans were not soft humans, were not harmless humans, were the descendants of creatures that had hunted woolly mammoths with sharp sticks, and somewhere in their strange paint bodies lived the memory of a time when they had been the most dangerous things on an entire planet. The battle lasted 11 minutes from first breach to final shot, 11 minutes to carve through a crew of over 100 Verax warriors, 11 minutes to teach an entire species why you should never ever take human children from their beds. When it was over, Marcus stood outside the holding cell where his daughter had been kept for almost 2 weeks, and his hands were shaking as he entered the code to open the door. The door slid open, and there she was. Lily ran into her father's arms, and for a moment the terrible warrior who had just waded through an ocean of blood disappeared entirely. There was only a father holding his child and crying tears that he had refused to shed since the night she was taken. "I knew you would come," Lily whispered into his chest. "I told them you would come, and they did not believe me, but I knew. I will always come for you," Marcus replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "No matter where they take you, and no matter how far I have to go, I will always come." The other captives emerged from the cell behind Lily, and they stared at the human soldiers with expressions of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Sarah, the nurse, looked at the carnage in the corridor and then back at Rodriguez. How many of them were there? "Enough," Rodriguez replied simply. David, the engineer, shook his head slowly. "We heard the fighting, but we never imagined. We never thought anyone would actually come for us." "You are human," Kowalski said, as he applied a field bandage to his wounded shoulder. "That means someone will always come." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the crushing Talon, Captain Skethrow watched the slaughter unfold through his security cameras and felt his entire understanding of the universe collapse around him. He had locked himself into command center the moment it became clear that his warriors were losing, and now he crouched behind his command chair while the sounds of battle grew closer and closer. The ancient report had been right. The humans were not prey at all. They were predators, apex predators, and they had been hiding in plain sight all along. The calm voice came through the bridge speakers, and Skethrow recognized it as belonging to the human leader. "I know you are in there, Captain, and I know you are watching this through your cameras on the security feed. Marcus Chen looked directly at the bridge camera and smiled. "Open the door, and you might survive this. Make me come through it." "And I promise you will not." Scathril stared at the humans' face and saw something there that he had never seen in any species before. He saw the absolute certainty of a being who knew exactly what he was capable of and had no doubts about his ability to follow through on any threat he made. The captain's clawed hand moved toward the door controls. For a moment he hesitated, and some part of him wanted to fight to the end like a true Verax warrior. But then he saw Lily's face appear on the camera beside her father, and he saw the look that passed between them, and he understood that there was no force in the galaxy that could stand against that kind of love. The door slid open, and Marcus Chun walked onto the bridge of the crushing talon. "Smart choice," Marcus said as he secured the captain's hands behind his back. "You are going to answer for what you have done, but at least you will be alive to do it." Skethral looked up at the human who had just destroyed everything he believed about the natural order of the universe. "What are you?" he whispered. Marcus paused and considered the question. "We are humans," he said finally, "and we take care of our own, no matter what." He turned and walked back to his daughter, leaving the broken captain to contemplate the terrible mistake he had made. The Verax had thought they were predators. They had been wrong. The real predators had just taught them a lesson they would never forget. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when the Verax warship limped into port at Central Station, 3 weeks after the incident aboard the crushing Talon. Ambassador Calvareth of the Fulani watched through the observation windows as the damaged vessel was guided into a docking berth. And what he saw made his 4 hearts beat faster with concern. The ship was covered in scorch marks and breach patches, and its proud weapons arrays hung limp and broken, like the wings of a wounded bird. But the damage to the hull was nothing compared to what waited inside when the station security teams boarded the vessel. They found Captain Skethril and his entire surviving crew bound and restrained in the cargo hold. Every single Verax warrior had been tied up using their own chains, the same chains they had used to hold human captives, and pinned to the captain's chest was a single data chip. "What happened here?" demanded the security chief, a grizzled Karathi veteran who had seen many strange things in his long career. Skethral looked up at him with hollow eyes and spoke in a voice that had been broken by 3 weeks of captivity. "The humans happened." The data chip was rushed to the Galactic Council chambers, where representatives from 17 different species gathered to view its contents. What they saw changed everything they thought they knew about humanity. The recording began with footage from the crushing Talon security cameras, showing 12 humans boarding the ship and systematically dismantling a crew of over 100 trained Verax warriors. The council members watched in stunned silence as the humans moved through the corridors with deadly efficiency, taking wounds that should have killed them and fighting through injuries that would have stopped any other species cold. "This cannot be real," whispered the Delvari ambassador, her tentacles coiling in distress. "No species fights like this. It defies all logic and self-preservation instinct." But the footage continued, and soon even the most skeptical observers had to accept what they were seeing. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources or political advantage. They were fighting for something far more dangerous. They were fighting for their young. When the combat footage ended, a new file opened on the display, and a human face appeared. It was a woman in military uniform, and the insignia on her shoulder identified her as a representative of something called Terran High Command. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," the woman said in a calm and measured voice. "My name is Admiral Chun. Yes, the Chun. And I have been authorized to deliver the following message on behalf of the United Earth Government." The council chamber was so quiet that the hum of the environmental system sounded like thunder. "We are a young species," Admiral Chun continued. "We have only been part of the galactic community for a short time, And we have tried our best to be peaceful and cooperative neighbors to all. We do not seek war. We do not seek enemies. We do not seek to prove ourselves superior to any other species in this vast and wonderful universe. Her expression hardened, and her eyes seemed to bore directly into every being watching the message. But understand this, we are persistence predators, and that means something very specific about how we deal with threats. We do not forget, we do not forgive, and we will walk through fire and crawl through vacuum and fight through death itself for our children. The Verax took human colonists from their homes, and we have taken them back. The Verax thought they could treat our people as cargo, and we have shown them the error of their ways. Let this serve as a warning to any species considering similar actions in the future. Admiral Chun leaned closer to the camera, and her final words were delivered with absolute conviction. Touch our children, and we will find you. There is no distance too great, and no obstacle too dangerous, and no enemy too powerful to stop us from bringing them home. Adjust your databases accordingly. The message ended, and chaos erupted in the council chamber. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages, and some species immediately began demanding that humanity be sanctioned or restricted or contained before they became a threat to galactic stability. But Ambassador Calverath raised a hand for silence, and the chamber gradually quieted. I believe this is a matter that requires reflection rather than reaction, he said carefully. The humans have not attacked any species unprovoked. They have simply demonstrated what happens when you provoke them first. They slaughtered over 100 Verax warriors, protested the Verax representative, after those warriors kidnapped human civilians from their homes. Calverath replied sharply, I seem to recall that the Verax have been engaged in similar activities across dozens of systems for centuries, and this council has done nothing to stop you. Perhaps it is time we updated our understanding of which species actually pose a threat to galactic peace. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the Council could not agree on any punitive measures against humanity, because deep down, every representative in that chamber knew that their own species would have done the same thing if given the opportunity. They would have fought just as hard and died just as willingly to protect their children. They simply had never been given the chance to prove it. Galactic Predator Index was updated that very cycle, and the new entry for humanity was drafted by a committee of scholars who had studied the crushing town footage for weeks category. Apex Persistence Predator Danger Rating, Extreme, Subclassification, Honey Badger Analog, Reference, Earth Fauna, Database, Threat Assessment, Maximum, Do not engage under any circumstances. Notes: humans appear harmless under normal conditions and prefer peaceful trade and diplomatic relations with all species. However, when threatened or provoked, humans undergo a behavioral transformation that has no equivalent in any other known species. They become relentless, unstoppable, and completely indifferent to personal danger or injury. They will pursue enemies across star systems and decades if necessary. They will take wounds that should kill them and continue fighting. They will sacrifice their own lives without hesitation to protect their families and communities. Do not engage, do not provoke, do not take dare. Young, there is no profit worth what follows, and on a small colony world called New Meridian, life slowly returned to normal in the weeks and months after the raid. The damaged homes were rebuilt, and the stolen colonists were welcomed back as heroes. And the community grew closer together in the aftermath of their shared trauma. But some things had changed forever. Marcus Chun still lived in the same house where he had raised his daughter since her mother passed away. And the storage shed where he kept his armor was no longer locked. He did not expect to need it again, but he wanted to be ready just in case, because the galaxy was vast and dangerous, and there were many species out there who had not yet learned the lesson that the Verax had learned. Some of them would need to be taught, and when that day came, Marcus and his fellow humans would be ready to teach them. Lily grew up strong and fierce and unafraid. And she never forgot the 2 weeks she spent in that holding cell aboard the crushing Talon. She never forgot the way she had fought back against her captors. She never forgot the sound of her father's voice as he came for her through fire and blood and darkness. And she never forgot the most important lesson that experience had taught her. Humans were not prey-humans, had never been prey-humans. We're the quiet ones in the back of the galactic classroom. The ones who did not start fights, but who absolutely finished them. The ones who smiled and traded and negotiated and cooperated right up until the moment someone made the mistake of threatening what they loved, and then the smiles disappeared, and something else emerged. Something that had no mercy and no fear and no quit. Something that would chase you to the end of the universe and beyond. Something that the galaxy was only just beginning to understand years later. When Lily was old enough to join the Terran Defense Force herself, she was assigned to a peacekeeping mission on the edge of known space. An alien ambassador approached her during a diplomatic function and asked how such a small and fragile-looking species had managed to earn such a fearsome reputation. Lily smiled, her father's smile, and answered with words that would echo through galactic history. "We are not the biggest or the strongest or the fastest," she said, "but we love our families more than we fear death. And that makes all the difference." The ambassador nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "And if someone threatens your families?" Lily's smile did not waver, but something shifted behind her eyes. "Then we become what we have always been underneath. We become the thing that hunted everything else into extinction on our home world. We become honey badgers, and honey badgers never lose." She walked away, leaving the ambassador to contemplate the warning that humanity had been giving the galaxy since the very first day they stepped off their home planet. "Be kind to us, and we will be the best friends you ever had, but harm us or ours, and you will learn why every predator on Earth learned to fear the soft little creatures who walked on 2 legs and refused to ever give up." The Verax had learned that lesson. The galaxy was still learning it in somewhere. Sitting on a porch under alien stars, Marcus Chun watched his grandchildren play in the yard and smiled. He was old now, and his fighting days were behind him, but the spirit that had driven him across star systems to rescue his daughter still burned bright.